Moving on. In the 10-year period between 2002 and 2011, there were 24 human cases of rabies in the United States. 4 of them were from organ transplants, which I mentioned earlier. 13 of those people had direct contact or were bitten by an animal. But here's the kicker. 7 people who came down with rabies had no obvious animal contact. They have no clue how these people got rabies. That's pretty scary when you think about that. Some cases from 2011, a 24-year-old soldier serving in Afghanistan was bitten by a dog on the hand, comes home, he's in New York. 8 months later, all of a sudden he's suffering from some neck tenderness, inability to swallow. It progresses to the point where he's showing full neurological symptoms and dies of rabies. A 40-year-old Massachusetts man has leg pain, inability to swallow, confusion, he has weakness, fever. His symptoms also progress to full neurological symptoms. He dies of rabies. They analyze what kind of rabies he has, and it's a subtype that's only found in dogs in Brazil. When questioning his family, well, was he in Brazil recently? So actually he was in Brazil, and he was in contact with a dog that might have had rabies or was acting pretty strange, but it was 8 years earlier. 8 years this virus was hanging out in his body, and then all of a sudden it took over. We'll wait for you to answer. Do you want me to talk to them? Another Massachusetts man, a 63-year-old man, develops elbow pain, inability to swallow, and then hydrophobia, dies of rabies. Turns out he woke up one morning and 2 or 3 months earlier and found a bat in his bedroom. No history of bite from the bat or anything. The bat's just hanging out in the bedroom. 2 months later, he dies of rabies. In fact, usually if you do find the bat in your bedroom, in your house, and you don't know what was going on, you're supposed to get treated prophylactically for rabies anyway, because apparently you could get bit by a bat and not even feel it. An 8-year-old girl in California all of a sudden is having sore throats, fever, difficulty swallowing, progresses to paralysis, convulsions, neurological symptoms. She's diagnosed with rabies. Turns out 2 months earlier she was scratched by a cat in a feral cat colony near her school. Fortunately, she survived. The reason is because of this, the Milwaukee protocol. This is the treatment that's currently tried, and I emphasize tried, on people who have symptoms of rabies. It was first used in 2004 on this teenage girl who was bitten on the finger by a bat that turned out to have rabies, and she developed signs of rabies. And what happens is you're put into a medically induced coma with ketamine and midazolam, which some of us use to induce anesthesia in our animals also. You're given antiviral and symptomatic treatment, and the theory is you're giving your body time to develop antibodies to fight off the rabies virus. Because the thinking is rabies doesn't destroy the brain, it just keeps the brain from doing what it's supposed to do. So if you're in a coma and you're artificially, you're on a ventilator, your heart rate is stabilized, those kind of things, and you survive long enough, your body will fight off the rabies virus. So it's worked in 6 people out of 35. So for 29 people, it did not work. 3 of the people who did survive, unfortunately, have profound neurological problems. So once again, I want to emphasize, if you are bit by an animal, it turns out it had rabies, if you don't do anything about it, if you wait till you have signs of rabies, you're probably not going to survive. So here's where I work. This is Lollipop Farm in Rochester in Monroe County. And this is our intake stats from 2009, 10, 11, 12. So in 2009, we took in about 13,000 animals. About 4% of those animals came in with some kind of rabies vaccine history. 2010, 12,500 or so. About 3.5% of those animals came in with rabies vaccines. In 2011, 12,000 animals, only 3% of those came in with rabies vaccine. 2012, about 12,000 animals, still about 3% came in with a history of rabies vaccine. So that means 97% of the animals, of the dogs and cats that come into Lollipop Farm, we don't know their rabies status. We don't know if they've been in contact with an animal that had rabies, if they were bit or scratched by an animal in the past that had rabies. It's a blank slate. All those animals potentially could have rabies that we're coming in contact with and working on and with. So what about rabies shots, though? Are they effective? Are they 100% effective? Anybody have any guess? How effective are rabies vaccines in animals? Okay, then. A study in the Journal of the American Veterinary Medical Association in 2009 showed that 5% of the dogs and about 2.5% of the cats who were confirmed with rabies were previously vaccinated. So if you're putting all your trust in the rabies vaccine that the animals have gotten, it's foolish, because there are still some dogs and cats that will come down with rabies even being vaccinated. No one really knows what happened. You know, was the vaccine not given correctly? Was the animal immune compromised and couldn't mount a response to the vaccine? They so overdue from the vaccine that their immunity is plummeted? Nobody knows. But it's pretty scary that even when you get in animals with vaccines, that perhaps it's not going to be effective and protected. And if the animal already has rabies in it, you could vaccinate it every day and it's not going to help. They're going to come down with rabies. At Lollipop Farm, we have a large animal part, hence the word farm in Lollipop. We have cows, horses, goats, sheep, emus, ducks, goats, geese, all kinds of things running around. We back up to this big wooded area. We have a whole petting area for people to come in and hang out with the sheep and goats. We know we have foxes because unfortunately we lose a couple of geese and ducks to fox attacks every year. We know there are raccoons around in Monroe County. What about these guys? They certainly could get rabies too. We vaccinate them all for rabies, but is it 100% effective? Who knows? For the goats, it's off-label because the vaccine is not even approved for goats. What about the people who are coming in and hanging out with these animals and petting them, and the sheep and goats are slobbering all over these little kids, and who knows what's going on? Fortunately, nothing's happened, but it's certainly a potential risk. So now let's talk about us and in what happens in your organization. Does your organization have a written SOP on what happens if you are bit or scratched? Yes? No? Everybody have one in their organization? Everyone know? Good. Some people haven't shaken their heads, so I don't know. Is it written? Or you just go around and say, oh, if you get bit, just do this, that, and the other thing. But you need to have a concrete written statement on what should be done. Even if it's written down, is it followed? Are people, if they are bit or scratched, are they filling out the proper documentation? Is it enforced? It's sad, I'm sad to say that even where I work in my clinic, some of the techs and assistants, when they get scratched or bit, don't report it. Don't say anything about it. Why? Because they don't want these animals put on a 10-day bite hold to see if they develop signs of rabies. They don't want them potentially euthanized after the rabies hold is up, assuming they don't show signs of rabies, because, well, now this maybe is an aggressive animal and shouldn't go up for adoption. So they don't fill them out. But it's my job to yell at them for numerous things, including this, to make sure they are filling this thing out, to make sure that they are protected in case this animal would end up having rabies. What about the location of the animal that did bite or scratch? Are you taking it out of the general population? Is it being put in isolation or quarantine somewhere by itself? Or are you leaving it in the cattery with the other cats? Or in a dog group, a play group or whatever, and leaving it up front for everyone to come and see and play with and touch? And who's doing the evaluation of the animal when it's in quarantine? Is it a vet, a tech, a staff member with knowledge, or is it the bookkeeper from administration or the pizza delivery guy to the shelter? Who's watching this animal? Who's looking at it to make sure during that 10-day period it's not showing signs of rabies? Here's some bite incidents from Lollipop Farm where I am and our local municipal shelter, Rochester Animal Services, over the last couple of years. So people are getting bit. This doesn't even include scratches. This is just bite wounds. Think about how many bites go on from animals in your organizations. In our place, we were in the teens most of the time. In 2012, we had a big increase, and what happened was we got a lot of new staff in 2012. And who gets bit? Usually the new staff, until they learn how to handle the animals and what to do. So we had a big increase then. But it's a problem, it happens a lot. So, the bite reports are filled out, the accidents reports are filled out, and the animals certainly are put in quarantine, and we're monitoring them to make sure they're not showing signs of rabies during that time. So, we've seen that rabies is in New York State. We know raccoons carry. We see raccoons are all over the place. We see these animals are coming to shelter with unknown rabies vaccine status. We know they come in with bites and scratches. Sometimes we don't even know they had bites or scratches. People aren't giving us the whole information. Rabies could take weeks to months in animals to show itself. Are you safe working with these animals? That's the question. And what could you do to protect yourself? So the U.S. Public Health Service, their Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, recommends that anyone in the frequent rabies risk category get pre-exposure vaccinated. There's 4 categories. There's continuous, and that's for people who work in rabies labs and with the virus. There's frequent, which are people who work with animals in a rabies endemic area, which is us. There's infrequent, where people work with animals in a non-endemic area, and then there's, I think, uncommon, which is just for the everyday public. So we work in the frequent risk category area. How many of you are pre-exposed vaccinated? Good, most of you, about 2/3 of you, that's good. A study just came out in this recent JAVMA, actually, of a survey of animal workers in West Virginia, which is also endemic for rabies. 93% of the vets are vaccinated who work in West Virginia animal hospitals, but only 29% of the techs and the assistants are vaccinated. That's crazy. I know in the clinic, part of the job description for our techs and our assistants it's your job to get bit and not let the vets get bit. So if anyone should be vaccinated, it should be them. You need to be vaccinated. If you work in a shelter in New York or any other endemic area, you need to be pre-exposed vaccinated.